Welcome or welcome back to 78 Reflections. My name is Patty Lane and I am so glad you're here. Today I'm responding to a tarot tag that I saw recently about our idealized self. And I can't remember whose video I watched first, but I will link the ones that I've seen in the description box. They've all been great. I actually think that Peekaboo Rose might be the first one that I saw. I think it was Julie's. Anyway, I've watched at least 3 or 4 of them. And I immediately thought, oh yes, I definitely have some of those and it's so relatable. So I thought it would be fun to jump into the conversation and share a few of the decks from my tarot shelf that represent an idealized version of myself. So I am going to start with Tarot of the Spirit. Now, this is not the guidebook that comes with the Tarot of the Spirit. This is the guidebook that comes with the Tarot of the Spirit. But I purchased this deck early on. And well, now I'm second guessing how early on, because I remember very clearly that I was researching decks that I thought would be helpful for a Decan walk. And that's what took me to this deck. Now I know that this deck has some Thoth influences. I know very little about this deck, but I don't even know if I knew what Thoth was at the time when I purchased it. And you know what intrigued me about this? Well, I'm sure somebody recommended it for a Decan walk. I don't remember who. But what intrigued me about it was how different it was from the Waite-Smith. And I just thought it was really fascinating. And I was also really excited at the opportunity to learn more and to increase my depth, I guess, as a tarot reader and, you know, do the study in connection with my Decan walk. And the thing that was especially appealing was the fact that it had this book that I could purchase. Look at this book. It's wild. Let's see how many pages it is. 400 and some pages. The Star Tarot is a similar story. I may have even purchased them at the same time. I don't remember for sure. This one is different than the Tarot of the Spirit. It has a lot more of kind of the Waite-Smith imagery. And what I liked about the Star Tarot was that there was so much symbolism in every single card. And in addition to that, it had this really substantial guidebook that would be really incredible to learn from. And what was so appealing to both of these decks was exactly why they didn't end up working out, is because my idealized tarot self loved the idea about being able to learn so much about symbolism and I don't know. I don't even know for sure what all I wanted to learn from these two. But this idea that I could really increase my knowledge, because I don't really like purchasing just tarot books. I'd rather purchase new decks that have great books. And in some cases that works, and some cases it doesn't. In this case, I wanted to do a Decan Stroll because I decided a Decan walk was too much of a commitment. Yet at the same time, I purchased these 2 decks. So what I wasn't really thinking about is realistically, the realistic self is where am I going to find not just the time, but the mental bandwidth for all of that study. The whole point of the Decan Stroll for me was dipping my toe in astrology through the lens of the tarot. And so I wanted to do it in, I guess, a less intense way, but I ended up sabotaging myself by layering in all of this extra learning and symbolism. And in the end, I'll be honest, it just was too daunting. All of the things that I needed to do with each decan became too much. And so what ended up happening was I went on a sabbatical. Well, I dropped out, but I have come back. I have come back from it. And instead of trying to add in a bunch of complexity and interpretation and study, here's the Star Tarot guidebook, which is fabulous. And I have worked with this deck some. But the truth of the matter is, I didn't really have the bandwidth for it. So it ended up to be too much. And I have come back to the Decan Stroll recently, but I'm not really using these decks and I'm keeping it much more simple. And if you're interested in that, I do have a playlist. So what do these decks represent for me? It's the idealized version of myself who has lots of time, energy, and mental bandwidth to study, dig deep, spend countless hours going through dense guidebooks, interpreting all of these symbols. But that's not actually how I practice tarot right now. And that's not really practical as part of my Decan walk, or Decan Stroll, as I like to say. So the second prompt is about the Oracle deck. And at first I thought I didn't have one, but then I remembered this deck, and I tuck it behind all my other decks because I don't use it. And this has to do with the witch I thought I'd be. So this deck, Making Magic Oracle, oh, who knows who influenced me to buy it? Someone influenced me to buy it. But this deck is used for spells. And there are spells in this book that you can use along with the Oracle. And I have done exactly one spell when I received this deck. But here's the truth. I don't do spells. I'm not a spellcaster. I have an altar. My altar is really meaningful to me. But I don't really cast spells. Maybe I would like to be a witch that casts spells, but that's not where I'm at right now. So I have used this once. I did one spell. I think it was this one, actually. I think it was Breaking Bad Habits. So what you do is you go into this book and then it tells you what to do. but I just don't, I think that's the witch I thought I would be. I don't think it's the witch that I am. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is decks that I purchased for an idealized version of myself, but I ended up modifying. And I have 3. So this one is the Dreams of Gaia. This one is the John Bauer. And this one is the Witch's Wisdom. I have to think about what their names all are. So this is Dreams of Gaia. So all of these have been modified, cut down, remove labels for similar reasons. You can see that they are imperfect. And so, like, obviously this, it's not directly in the middle. I don't care about that. This one you can see, I probably should have just cut a little bit off more. I don't care about that either. This one, you can see this part is bigger than this part. I don't actually care about that either. So these decks have some things in common, but mostly I just found them very difficult to work with. So let's start with the Witch's Wisdom. So I bought this one for a deck study, which I turned out that I don't really like doing deck studies. And this, if you're not familiar, the Witch's Wisdom deck it goes its own way completely. It renumbers the majors. Yeah, it just, to me, this did not work for me as a tarot deck at all. And so what I ended up doing, it was also so big, so it was hard to shuffle. I have tiny hands, so it was too hard to shuffle. Don't like the cardstock. So what I ended up doing was choosing words from the guidebook, keywords, that I decided I wanted to associate with that card. And you can see I didn't do it consistently. I wrote the words wherever I wanted to. I wanted to, rather than trying to do the same thing on every card, I wanted to do it all different, so it wasn't my intention. Also, some have one word, some have more than one word. It really has to do with what I felt I needed to understand this imagery or to use it. So I like this deck as an oracle card, as oracle cards. I like the imagery of it. And so while this did not work out for me as a tarot deck, I'm actually quite happy to have it as an oracle deck. And I really want to try to work more with my intuition, which is what I think this will allow me to do. This cardstock was really easy to write on with a Sharpie, which I appreciated. Look at that, isn't that beautiful? I love that. I love this card too. So similarly, the Dreams of Gaia, this deck, we have been on a roller coaster ride, me and this deck. And this deck also has its own system. The cards were too big. I hated the titles. So I converted it to an oracle deck and did something similar with writing keywords, in some cases one word, in some cases more than one word, in some cases a little phrase. And I did the same thing where I just wrote them wherever I wanted to and used a Sharpie. This matte cardstock allowed for that. And you know, I don't love the imagery. I love some of it, but like this kind of imagery, I do not like at all. But I like this. I like this. It's very interesting the way they chose to come up with a mismatch of imagery. But I do enjoy this deck as an oracle. So I bought this deck when I was in New Orleans. I don't regret buying it. I learned a lot from it. Look at that. That card always reminds me of my friend. But now it's an oracle deck, and I'm happy to have it. This is a very recent, the John Bower. This is a very recent modification. So what I did was I cut off the top and bottom, and I did edge it. It's my first time edging. I just used a brown Sharpie. I'm pretty happy with it. So this is not going to be easy to write on because, first of all, it is a lot of the cards are dark, and it's kind of glossy. I don't think it would hold a Sharpie. But what I was thinking with this deck is just using it intuitively. I don't know if that's going to work for me or not, or if I'll end up trying to find a pen that I can write on that'll stay. I know some people say use Posca pens. I got some Posca pens. That didn't work for me. But if you have any ideas, let me know. When I created my Soul Cards tarot, I had a really hard time finding something that would write on them. But maybe I could use it intuitively. I do like the imagery in the John Bower, but because it's his artwork that was kind of forced into the tarot positions, it didn't resonate for me. And so, yeah, I like it. I like it modified. And I know that Dawn Michelle did it and she put contact paper on the back. I don't mind that. That doesn't bother me. So this was just something I did recently. I did it in the last week. And so I haven't worked with it yet, but I'm excited to work with it. And so those three decks, the first two were because they didn't follow the tarot system, so they just bugged me. And I didn't want to learn a new system or always use the guidebook. This one, it was just the imagery that didn't work. And I thought, my idealized self thought I would like it, but now I know that I don't like that. So the final part of this tag talks about practices that belong to my idealized self versus my real self. And I'll say that what I've come to realize is that my muggle life can be very intense and can be very demanding. And I spend a lot of time thinking strategically, working with complex ideas, breaking them down for learners. And sometimes my mental bandwidth at the end of the day or end of the week isn't very broad. And so what I've discovered is in my magical life, I don't want to add more complexity or intense study. I want something lighter. I want practices that allow me to build knowledge slowly with curiosity, without feeling like I'm taking on another intense area of study, or that I have to figure out how to cast spells when I have no idea how to do that. I want it to be light. I want it to be exploratory. I want it to be, fun. So I think the biggest lesson for me is that adding complex systems, layers into my tarot practice, I'm not going to read this book. I'll tell you that right now. Well, maybe someday I will. I don't think I will though. So I need to keep it simple. Another example of that is I'm doing Marseille in March, but I'm dipping my toe in the Marseille. I want to learn a little bit about the Marseille, but I don't want to do a deep exploration of it. So I've really gotten to know myself more. And even today I was out with a friend exploring a witchy store. And I remembered thinking to myself, every time I was looking at something and wanting to purchase it, I'm thinking, is this for my real self or is this for my idealized self? And so from that perspective, this tag has really given me some powerful food for thought. And I know that what works for me right now, today, in the here and now, is simple, playful, sustainable, and that might change in the future. Who knows? But I want to thank the creator of the tarot tag for this prompt. It was such a thoughtful one. And for anyone who's watching, if this resonates with you, I'd love to hear in the comments about your idealized self versus your real live self. And or maybe you want to do a video response. And if you do, I hope you tag me because I would love to watch your video. So that is all for me for this video. Please like this video if you do. Subscribe if you want to hear more from me. And may the cards bring us truth bombs when we need it and gentleness when we don't. See you next time.